In the mid-2000s, Pokémon was in the midst of a transitional phase. At this point, the franchise was no longer a huge cultural phenomenon, but it was still incredibly successful, with the mainline games and trading cards continuing to sell very well, the anime remaining popular on television, and toys and merchandise were still being pumped out at a steady rate. However, as successful as the franchise still was, there were several projects that came and went so fast, many people and fans either didn't know about them or were just forgotten over time, including many spin-off games like Pokémon Dash, Pokémon Troze, and then there's the subject of today's video that's probably the most unique project of them all, the Pokémon Learning League. Over the span of nearly 3 years, and mainly aimed at late elementary and early middle school students, the website covered 140 lessons all across the main subjects, be they about the solar system, percents, personal narratives, or even cyberbullying, and it did so by having Ash and his friends from the anime learning along with the players. But just where and how did the idea for this website even come from, who helped develop it, and why did it disappear from the web? As always, every one of those questions and more will be covered and answered in this video. So with all of that said, I'm the Media Nutso, and it's time for us to take a dive into the history behind the Pokémon Learning League. Now, before we jump into tackling the Learning League itself, let's first see just how this website came into being. Just a quick heads up, there's really not a lot out there about the Learning League's conception, so I'll make up for it by talking about other interesting tidbits. With that out of the way, the idea for the Learning League actually came from the CEO of Pokémon Japan himself, Tsunekazu Ishihara, as it's likely that he wanted to further broaden the franchise's horizons by venturing into relatively new uncharted territories. I say relatively new because this wasn't the first time Pokémon did an educational project. The first time they did was way back in 2000 with the Poké-ROMs, which were published by Mattel and the Learning Company. These were a series of mini-discs characterized with the sides of the discs being cut off on either side based around several different Pokémon that were broken up into 3 segments. A game of concentration where players have to match 2 math problems and numbers to uncover a hidden picture, the Trainer Center where it housed a multiplayer quiz, the Trainer Race, which comprised of 200 random questions, and the Observation Center, where players click through a landscape and view various screenshots from the anime. Then, 2 years after the Learning League, they released Learn with Pokémon Typing Adventure for the Nintendo DS, where with a special wireless keyboard, the main objective was to capture Pokémon by correctly typing out their names as they appear. You most likely never heard about it because it was only released in Japan, Europe, and Australia. So, with the idea for the website in hand, development on it began in January of 2006. Right around the time Pokémon USA began to fully handle the licensing of the franchise after their agreement with 4Kids Entertainment expired on December 23rd. All they needed now was the right company to help bring this website to life. Enter Scott Traylor. At the time, Traylor was an executive for the company 360 Kid, who were mostly known at the time for creating games and animation for various companies, including but not limited to Electronic Arts, Leapfrog, and Sesame Workshop. During a 2004 educational conference, Traylor met up with an attending speaker who suggested that one day the two should collaborate together on a project. Little did Traylor know, of course, was that person went on to be hired by Pokémon USA to develop an educational website, which eventually became the Pokémon Learning League. Once development on the site began, the first thing Pokémon USA did was select 3 companies to make one ed video, and 360 Kid was one of those candidates. out of the three, 360 Kid would be the company chosen for the job. The reason why was because they had the best animation, audio recording, character development, and most importantly, the best educational content writing. When the crew got word that they were going to be working on the website, they were very excited about it. I mean, who wouldn't be excited about working on a unique Pokémon project? Though they nearly didn't do it. Considering what the franchise is known for, the team almost turned the project down out of worry the site would retain the Pokémon battles. However, Pokémon USA assured them that they would not be included whatsoever, though there were a couple of exceptions, but I'll bring them up later. With the crew lined up, Pokémon USA asked them to create 12 episodes, to which one of their contacts would give them a list of topics to work off of, and from there, they'd conduct the needed research and writing process. There was also an advisory board who was in charge of what lessons would get taught on the website. This would be a rather tricky process, given that the team was made up of 12 people who were working in shifts and had to do a new episode every week. After that, those episodes would be sent over to Pokémon USA for approval. Later on, the number of episodes would double to 24, and then finally went up to 40. The goal the team had for the site was to turn out a new episode every 6 weeks, but this would prove to be challenging. The initial plan for each lesson was to have them be around 3 minutes long, but this proved to be impossible, as many of them couldn't be properly covered within that time frame. Thus, the more complex the topic was, the longer it took to make one episode. They also had to rework many of the lessons in order to correlate the educational material to certain state standards, as many had varying standards on what topics could and couldn't be covered. But that wasn't the only thing that had to be changed. Given many schools have specific dress codes on wearing anything that might be seen as too distracting or provocative, some of the characters' wardrobes had to be changed. This is why Dawn's wardrobe was modified to have her wearing long sleeves and leg stockings. Over the course of production, it had to be sped up so much their storyboards went from lovely renderings to just stick figures. Fortunately though, they weren't alone on this, as another company, Entropy Multimedia, handled the back-end data for them. As for the animation process, it was certainly an interesting one. 360 Kid only had, and I'm not making this up, one full-time animator on staff whose job it was to animate a whole minute in a week. As in, animating everything. The characters, the effects, the backgrounds, etc. Yeah, you can imagine it was a difficult task for just one person. Luckily, they had another outside hand aiding with that, 2 animators, who also developed the vector art library. The final result was animation that wasn't up to par with the main show, even in some of the lesser filler episodes, though there are some lessons that are more fluidly animated than others. It is worth mentioning though that it was done like that on purpose, so as to accommodate the low bandwidth connections many schools had at the time. Oh, and to further save on time, they intentionally left off the characters' shading and casting shadows. As for the backgrounds, they were initially going to be digitally painted, as suggested by this early clip from 2 animators' reel. However, because of the amount of time the team was given, they couldn't afford to do that for every episode, so they instead used low-res screenshots taken from the show. Initially, the team wanted to include a gaming mechanic, i.e. earning points every time the player successfully completed a lesson, and even planned to offer t-shirt iron-ons, but the latter ended up not materializing, and the point mechanic was added later on in production. From March through June of 2006, before the Learning League's official launch, a pilot program was conducted in New York, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, and West Virginia with 5th grade students to see if the website could effectively educate kids, which included early versions of 2 of the lessons that would be featured on the official site, probability and story elements, and 2 others that didn't make it, punctuation and steps of writing a research report. The results from that program showed that the lessons were quite effective, as the students were very interested and engaged with the stories and especially the characters. After all of that extensive research, development, testing, and intense production, The Pokémon Learning League officially launched in September of 2006. So now that we've covered all of that development, let's finally take a dive into the Learning League and see just how it all panned out. When the Learning League officially launched, it was initially free to access, likely as a means to gauge interest with students and educators. Then, on October 31st, it switched over to a monthly subscription model, which was always a part of the plan. As I mentioned at the very beginning of the video, the Learning League covered 140 lessons across the four main subjects: math, language arts, life skills, and science. Thus, for each one of them, a group of 4 characters were created to cover each main subject. These would be known as the mission guides. For math, that was handled by Ada, language arts was held by Lex, Quinn handled the life skills, and Ciara tackled science. Interestingly, going back to the pilot program for a bit, it was conducted so early the team hadn't developed the mission guides by that point. So for the early versions of story elements and probability, they had May and Max's father, Norman, for the former, and Blaine for the latter. Every episode of the Learning League was divided into 3 segments. Watch, where the player is introduced to the main conflict and lesson the characters have to deal with. Try, where the player is given a guided practice run that reinforces what had just been taught. And Apply, where the player does a challenge on their own and applies all the skills they've been taught over the course of the episode. Also, trivia note, one of the main inspirations for the Learning League was Brain Pop, and you can definitely see that in the way the lessons are presented.
Cyberbullying is what it sounds like: bullying on the internet or through emails and texts. It can include sending mean messages, posting embarrassing photos or secrets about somebody, leaving someone out of online groups, spreading rumors, posing as someone else to make them look bad.
I'm glad you called me, because when you're being bullied, you should always tell a trusted adult. Similar to real life, an online bully, a cyberbully, is someone who picks on you, harasses or embarrasses you over and over again. A cyberbully does it using the internet, or even cell phones.
The plot structure of every episode of the Learning League goes like this. Ash and the gang are up to various activities, be they visiting an old friend, traveling to a new location, going to or coming off a battle or contest, which was how they mostly got around having no actual battles, or just doing a mundane ritual, and they find themselves in a topic-specific situation they need help with. So they contact one of the mission guides via a special device called the Poképilot, where they, along with the player, learn about the specific topic and then apply their newly gained knowledge to help solve their problems. Yeah, it's a pretty formulaic structure, but it does the job well, particularly with how the lessons are presented. On top of that, the plots themselves are some of the most by the numbers, no pun intended, plots out there, like May learning to add and subtract fractions in order to bake a cake, Ash, May, and Max needing help to find Corphish by following the sound of its voice, Brock having trouble making friends with other people, and Dawn learning to summarize a letter she wants to send to her mother. Not to mention, the characters were slightly dumbed down in order for the lessons to work. Now, it's understandable why the team chose to go in that direction. Many other educational shows and websites have done the characters learning with the audience angle, and it can be done well with the right execution. That, and it helped make them feel a bit more relatable to the target audience. Still though, while some cases make sense, as some of the characters, like Ash or May, probably wouldn't have known much about some of the topics, it doesn't quite work well with others like Brock or Tracy, as they would be more likely to already be well versed in many of the subjects. Speaking of, obviously nowadays, many of the lessons would be very outdated, like the food pyramid, which was supplanted by the nutritional plate but was eventually brought back in a different form, and elements, where 6 new elements have been discovered in the 2 decades since that episode was made. Funny enough, the solar system actually came dangerously close to being dated on arrival. Why? Well, it initially was going to include Pluto in the planet count, but during production, the IAU had reclassified Pluto as a dwarf planet, so the crew had to make some last-minute changes to the episode, including adding in a line where Ciara mentions Pluto's reclassification.
We used to say that there are 9 planets in this solar system. Now there are considered only 8. We no longer include the last one, Pluto.
Wait, did it disappear or something?
Nope. It's just that scientists are always asking questions and learning new things. In this case, they came up with a clearer definition of a planet. And Pluto happens to fit in a different category now.
And if you play the episode in full frame, you'll find Pluto hanging outside the border, complete with all the facts about it, further showing just how last minute this change was. As I alluded to earlier, the animation here is not exactly the best. The characters are very rigid and stiff, there's some weird movements with their heads or when they gesture, and there are times where they attempt to show the characters from different angles, particularly in the early episodes, that just look off. Though, as I also mentioned, there are a few that are more fluidly animated.
But it's true! It's all awesome! Beep, blop, beep, blop.
Also, because they use screenshots for the backgrounds, many of which were from before the anime switched to digital coloring, they really stick out, and it sometimes doesn't look like the characters are actually in them. Oh, and because this was made during the transition to the Pokémon USA voice cast, their performances early on were pretty rough, but far from the worst. On a side note, none of the Pokémon had their Japanese voices, including Pikachu, so they ended up using archived recordings to fill them in. And they're pretty easy to spot if you listen very carefully.
There must be millions, maybe more. I know there are planets out there too, but I think planets are pretty different than stars. Battle! Shopping! Squirtle!
With all of that said, despite all of these flaws, there are plenty of aspects the Learning League had going for it. Unlike the main anime, the Learning League follows a pretty loose episodic format. Very rarely are any previous episodes referenced in others, with a few exceptions like the 2-part media episodes. It also allowed other characters like Misty and Tracy to have some time in the spotlight on their own, feature characters who hadn't shown up in the show in ages like Roxanne, Brawley, and DJ Mary.
Everyone, I just want to say how proud I am at how hard you've been working during our Future Trainers workshops. And Max, you didn't miss a single question on your test about Pokémon native to the Hoenn region. As a reward for all the hard work this class has been doing, I've got a little surprise for you. There's a traveling Pokémon battle team coming here, and you'll all be the special guests at the battle.
Man, that was some wave. I got crushed.
At least you're okay. That's what's most important.
Yeah, but my board's totaled. Major bummer. I'm landlocked, dude.
Thanks, Ash. I've got the write-up ready. Now we'll have some great shots to show on the news tonight. By the way, since you're visiting, I was hoping you could help me out.
Sure, what's up?
Turns out my weather forecaster couldn't make it in today. Do you think you could do the forecast on tonight's 6 o'clock news?
Ain't had a good handful where Ash and Pikachu don't show up or get mentioned. On top of that, the cast was able to visit different cities in different regions from episode to episode, similar to what had later been done on Pokémon Journeys. Plus, there are some actual funny moments.
Brock packed some food for us before we left.
Oh, great. Cold soup.
Maybe there's some trick for cooking it.
Don't worry, it'll wash off in a few days.
Then let's see how you'll like having green hair.
If it's any consolation, my face is extra greasy.
Ciara, you know, if you add B to Rock, you get me, Brock.
Also, while the episodes are obviously not in canon with the anime, there are plenty of times where they make references to specific episodes of the show.
Well, first I got Piplup. And I saw the legendary Mesprit.
Oh, cool.
Then I met Pikachu and Ash.
In the Indigo League, I had this match with Lieutenant Surge from Vermilion City. He chose his Raichu, and although Pikachu could have evolved to be its equal, it still chose not to evolve. I didn't understand, but Pikachu had a plan. Pikachu knew it was strongest staying the way it was most comfortable with itself. And in the end, Pikachu was able to defeat Raichu.
Not to mention, there are some odd quirks in many episodes. For instance, in equivalent fractions and point of view, there's a random female voice that doesn't sound like either Ada or Ciara.
Right. Let's start with the bread. Since there are 4 of you, we could simply divide the loaf into 4 parts.
Everyone but May went behind the stairs and fell through a hole in the floor.
Point of view is also notable for marking the only time Roger Parsons narrates for an episode of the Learning League, though it was only at the very end.
Our heroes close the door on another mystery and continue their journey to satisfy their unending thirst for adventure. Who knows what's in store for our heroes in the future? Well, I may be omniscient, but even I can't tell you.
The Lunar Cycle and Fractions are notably the only episodes to retain most of Casey Rogers' original recordings as Ash, though there are a couple of lines that were redone by Sarah Nottochenny, mainly where Ash addresses the mission guides.
That's true. And some nights you can't see the moon at all.
I wonder if there's a way to know for sure if the moon will be out.
Sierra at the Learning League lab would know. Let's give her a call on the Poképilot. Hey, Sierra, can you help us out?
Let's see if we can get some help on this.
Ada at the Learning League lab is really good at solving problems. She'll be able to help us out.
Another good one is in Good Sportsmanship. In there, MC Lillian looks very different from how she's supposed to look in the show. This is likely the result of the team being under such a time crunch they couldn't accurately recreate Lillian's exact look. So they ended up using one of their default models that looked the closest to Lillian and added her outfit, which explains why her hair is in a different style and why she lacks the mole on her cheek. Also, Misty is depicted as having a much lighter skin tone than she does on the show. This may have been because they referenced some stock images where she was depicted as having that very skin tone. It's also suggested in some episodes, namely in The Sun and the Solar System, that the mission guides live in a separate universe from the anime.
We have a sun like yours, and that shouldn't be a surprise. My sun is only 93 million miles away from Earth.
I'm going to look at the Milky Way galaxy. That's my space neighborhood.
Plus, there were a few more standout episodes. Magnetism marked the only time a mission guide, Ciara, needed help with a problem, which was getting back to the Learning League lab. The Lunar Cycle was the very first lesson released, though technically the 4th one produced. Media was the only true 2-part story done for the website. Simple Machines were just 2 standalone episodes covering 3 different kinds of simple machines each. The Water Cycle for officially introducing Dawn, Elements and Scientific Method for being the only times more than one mission guide appears in an episode, etc, etc. But probably the 2 most standout ones were Online Safety and Cyberbullying. Why? Well, not only did they both feature Zoe, but also they were produced because of a mandate by the US Department of Education, which would really end up paying off, as more schools began to take notice of the website, since at the time, very few other educational companies had tackled those topics. Interestingly, the way the voice cast recorded for the Learning League is different from how they recorded for the anime. With the show, they had to have the lines sync up with both the original Japanese performances and the existing lip flaps. For the website though, they were able to record their lines first before any of the animation was done, which helped loosen up their performances. They also recorded the Learning League at DuArt Video and Film as opposed to Taj Productions like the show was at the time. Now, while Pokemon battles weren't allowed to be featured, there were a few exceptions, like in Good Sportsmanship and in 3 States of Matter, and whenever the characters were training or dealing with Team Rocket. Another quirk is that the characters break the 4th wall here, which was nothing new as it had been done plenty of times on the show, mainly by Team Rocket. Here though, it's more like how it was done on Dora the Explorer, where they mainly ask the players for help on a challenge and say thank you to the players for the help. Though, unlike Dora, it doesn't feel like the characters are actually talking down to the audience.
There's a lot to the sun. Let's see if we got it all. Come on and help us.
I'm going to tell you about some of the stuff I've done since I've officially become a trainer.
As for the new characters exclusive to the site, with the exception of the mission guides, they're really not all that interesting. For the most part, they're pretty flat and one note, and they'll sometimes reuse the same models for different characters. Though there are a couple of exceptions, like Vanessa in expressing emotions, Brent in homework skills, and Lena in giving back. Now, if you've been paying attention to the clips, you may have noticed that there's one element missing from them.
Hi, Mom.
Well, hello, Dawn.
Want to see the new moves Piplup and I have been working on?
Of course.
There isn't any background music playing in them. Why is that? Well, the team initially did compose a musical score that would have been fitting with Pokémon. But during the pilot program, the teachers found that the music was too loud and distracting, so it was ultimately removed from the final product. Though there are little bits of music that pop up if you pay close attention.
We might call it moonlight, but the light doesn't actually come from the moon.
Then where does it come from?
The sun.
What? That doesn't make sense. Does it?
During its 3-year run online, the Learning League received great praise from critics, parents, and teachers, saying that they loved how it got kids to learn in a fun and entertaining manner, and that the lessons were interesting and engaging. Even the people at Pokémon USA and 360 Kid were thrilled with the reception. It was so good, they later forged a partnership with the Virginia Department of Education to demonstrate just how effective it was, since at the time, Virginia was well ahead of the curve in terms of educational tech. The positive reception also resulted in many schools repealing many bans they'd placed on Pokémon products being seen on campus. The site's critical success went on to win the website several awards, including an AAP Distinguished Achievement Award, a Bessie Award in the category of multi-subject for upper elementary, an iParenting Media Award, 2 SIIA Cody Awards, and the National Parenting Center's Seal of Approval. As for the number of subscribers, unfortunately that remains a total mystery, because Pokémon USA never disclosed the actual numbers. But if I had to give an estimate, it likely would have been around the 60 to 80,000 range. Why around that range? Well, bear in mind, at the time the site was up, there weren't any other educational sites like it around aside from BrainPop. That, and it was still a relatively new concept, and it wouldn't fully take off until the likes of ABC Mouse and the Adventure Academy over a decade later. So, with the positive reception and recognition the Learning League was receiving, why exactly did it shut down? Well, to make a long story short, around 2008, Pokémon USA had undergone a management shakeup and installed a newly appointed CEO, who really wasn't all that keen on the idea of Pokémon having an educational website, and so decided to shut it down. This decision was met with a lot of resistance from both 360 Kid and within Pokémon USA, but it did no good, and thus the website shut down in August of 2009. Now, had it been allowed to go on, the team wanted to take it in a more socially emotional direction, tackling subjects like learning to be kinder or giving friendship tips, but with a Japanese twist. But sadly, the team would never get that chance. Honestly, it's a shame the Learning League shut down so suddenly, as it did have a lot of promise and could have possibly become a regular main staple in elementary schools had it been given the chance to really flourish. Following the site's shutdown, Pokémon USA, who by 2009 had been rechristened the Pokémon Company International, sold off all of the site's assets to Paws Inc., the owners of Garfield at the time, and together with the Virginia Department of Education, the website was completely revamped and returned as the Infinite Learning Lab, also known as Professor Garfield. However, while it was a different site with the cast of Garfield in place of Pokémon, it notably repurposed some episodes and elements from the Learning League for some lessons, like for online safety and for cyberbullying, just to name a couple. This iteration lasted until July 1st, 2020, right as the Adobe Flash Player was being discontinued and phased out. But getting back to the Learning League, in the years since its shutdown, it had completely fallen into obscurity. While there were a couple of screenshots, old promo pages, and many of the site's links have been preserved on archive.org, these did not preserve the Flash Player, thus rendering it impossible to play any of the episodes on that site. So for a while, it seemed like the episodes would be lost to time. That was until November 3rd, 2015, when YouTube user LARG found the watch segment of the Water Cycle episode on Newgrounds and uploaded it to YouTube. Then 2 years later, on August 17, 2017, the watch segment of Making Friends was found on com.game, and 2 months later, on November 29th, the watch segment of Online Safety, yeah, all three were just the watch segments of their respective episodes, were also found on Newgrounds, though heavily edited to be completely different. But while these findings were great, they were nothing compared to the biggest discovery made on January 17, 2021, when one user on the Lost Media Wiki forums, Amit Kaul, revealed that he had downloaded and archived all of the files while the site was up, and uploaded all of them on archive.org, along with the external Flash player needed to play the episodes, thus making them officially found media. Now, you may ask, how was it possible to download all of the files? Turns out, it was actually pretty easy, as the links were simple URL addresses, making it easy to download the files from the site. Today, all the files are still up on archive.org, so you can go download them and play them all for yourself. All in all, the Pokémon Learning League was a flawed but overall enjoyable website. Sure, the plots were by the books, the characterizations were off, some of the lessons are outdated, and the animation wasn't exactly the best, even at the time it was made, but overall, it was entertaining for what it was, with the way it taught the lessons, and though the characters were a bit off, it was fun getting to see some of them get a chance to shine and to revisit some old anime locations. If you'd like to give them a try, as I said, go to archive.org and download them for yourself. Or if you can't, I recommend checking out the Pokémon Learning League Archive YouTube channel, where a good amount of the episodes have been uploaded. As always, if you enjoyed the video, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and leave a like and a comment on this video. Also, if you'd like to help make my channel bigger and better, please head over to patreon.com/MediaNutso, where your pledge can truly make a big difference. With that said, what did you think of the Pokémon Learning League? Do you think it did a good job at what it did, and would you have used it back in the day and when you were attending school? Until next time, this is MediaNutso saying, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.